what's funny? What's funny? What's funny? What's funny? What's funny? What's funny?
Hey guys, Culture here. Today we're going to discuss what funny is. More specifically, we'll figure out why certain things are funny and the forms that humor takes.
This episode is not going to be funny.
I think that's fine. People will probably appreciate that this is a more academic discussion of comedy.
I can actually hear the tweet in your voice. The rough texture is grating my ears.
Now you know how I feel listening to your voice all the time. Laughter is something which people all around the world share, a fundamental component of the human experience. So why is humor so integral to the human condition? What function does it serve? Perhaps one of the most rudimentary forms of comedy is slapstick. Someone gets hurt, we laugh. Just like that. Of course, this clip is only funny because we know the kid is fine. There's no serious damage. One theory suggests that this is the function of laughter, to let others know that everything's alright. It works for physical comedy, and it also works when we're teasing each other. Laughter lets everyone know what's okay and what's not.
So it's kind of like puppies play fighting with one another, where one of them puts the other one's head in its mouth and the other one's like, that's cool, but then they bite a bit too hard and suddenly it's on, and they paw at each other thinking they're all tough, but they're actually just adorable.
Yeah, sure, Crash. It's exactly like that. Extending that idea out, one can think of laughter as a signal that something is outside of our normality, but in a harmless way. The ability to recognize these social and logical incongruences demonstrates emotional intelligence and cognitive flexibility, both traits that we seek out in partners. That means people with a better sense of humor are more attractive and more likely to pass their genes on.
Yeah, I've heard this one a million times. I'm just looking for a nice, funny guy who will treat me with respect. Lies! All of it lies! Girls want dark, brooding, mysterious dudes. That's why I'm like catnip to the ladies.
Sometimes you upset me when you talk. Contrary to your baseless opinion, being funny is definitely endearing. Some researchers suggest that this is why males in particular tend to bag each other.
Bag? Ew.
Come on, you know what I mean. Bag, rib, razz, mock, rag. Tease one another is what I'm trying to say. Common knowledge in the field is that women find men attractive if they can make them laugh, whilst men find women who laugh attractive. It's kind of like a positive feedback loop, which is what coupling up is all about. Men's teasing each other is just one way to show off their chops, to demonstrate to girls looking on how funny they are. Of course, it's not as simple as that, but it certainly explains the biological basis of laughter.
All of this is useless, though, if you were born without a funny bone in your body. Well, except the funny bone, which all people are born with, unless you were born with some kind of condition, in which case I suppose you could say...
Enough, we get it. All is not lost, though. Even if you don't consider yourself a funny person, you can still learn to be funny. You just have to make the most of what you've got. Maximize the comedy potential within you. Some people are witty, some people have unique perspectives, some can tell hilarious stories, and of course there are the clowns who get laughs by being the butt of their own joke. To reveal which path is best for you, it's best to understand the different types of funny.
You said butt!
Despite the evidence in front of me, I truly believe that anyone can be funny. One theory of what makes things funny is the Superiority Theory, proposed as early as the ancient Greeks, but refined by Charles R. Gruner in his book, The Game of Humor. Gruner proposes that we laugh because we are made to feel superior to the people we are watching. Take this baby, for example. According to Gruner, we might say that we feel superior because we know what's going to happen whilst the baby doesn't. It's essentially an 11-second demonstration of dramatic irony. We might also say that the baby looks so defenseless with its adorably chubby cheeks that just seeing the baby is already funny.
Well, this doesn't seem fair. My adorably chubby cheeks never make you laugh. You just yell at me.
I yell at you to pull your pants back up. You can't moon people in a hospital crash.
Tell that to Mr. Jenkins. He ties his hospital gown a little too loosely for my liking.
The superiority theory also explains why we laugh when someone embarrasses themselves, or why sad sack characters can be so amusing. It's that I'm glad it's not me mentality that makes us burst out laughing. But there are other theories that just as easily explain why this clip is so funny. The incongruity theory holds that humor arises when an expectation is created, then broken. In this same clip, you might say that we laugh because the baby doesn't react how we expect. Most babies cry when they're surprised by the jack-in-a-box, but this baby is shocked and then just returns to his previously calm state.
And the way he reacts is fantastic too, springing up like he's also a jack-in-a-box and stretching his arms out.
Finally, we have the newest and perhaps most robust explanation, the benign violations theory. Formulated by behavioral scientists Peter McGraw and Caleb Warren, this theory posits that situations that are at first glance dangerous but are in actuality completely safe cause us to laugh. In other words, violations aren't funny, but benign violations are. When the baby gets scared, we laugh instinctively because the surprise is harmless. This goes right back to what I was saying about slapstick at the beginning of the episode.
Enough about the baby culture! My years of making people laugh by pooping my pants are over! I need to evolve, to become a muskrat of comedy rather than a lemming!
Weird animal choice, buddy. My opinion is that if you want to be funnier, you have to look at what's already funny. If you have a basic understanding of the form that comedy takes, then you can either replicate it or break it in new, original ways. For you, let's just focus on the basics.
Wow, I kneel at the altar of your comic wisdom and you just spit in my face.
Putting aside physical humor for the moment, the classic archetype of humor is the joke, comprised of a setup and a punchline. Jokes work off the incongruity theory of humor, create an expectation, and then break it. For example, take this joke, deemed, quote, the world's funniest joke by an online experiment called Laugh Lab, which rated over 40,000 jokes by public opinion. Crash, I'll let you do the honors.
Two hunters are out in the woods when one of them collapses. He doesn't seem to be breathing and his eyes are glazed over. The other guy whips out his phone and calls the emergency services. He gasps, "My friend is dead! What can I do?" The operator says, "Calm down. I can help. First, let's make sure he's dead." There's a silence. Then a gunshot is heard. Back on the phone, the guy says, "Okay, now what?"
Yeah. I should have also explained that the jokes are way less funny when you preface them by saying that they're the funniest joke ever. But the point is, the phrase, make sure he's dead, can be taken two ways. We expect one meaning, but get the other. Hence, we laugh. We have other types of canned humor as well. Pre-written material that can be brought up regardless of context. Take riddles, for example, which have unexpected answers to simple questions.
What's worse than finding a worm in your apple? Finding half a worm.
Or so-called anti-jokes that play on your knowledge of common jokes to get a laugh.
What's worse than finding a worm in your apple? The Holocaust.
Very funny, I know. And of course, the classic one-liner that rolls setup and punchline into one section.
Velcro, what a ripoff!
And then we have quite the opposite of a one-liner, the Shaggy Dog Story. I'm not going to make you sit through Crash telling one of these long-winded stories with disappointing punchlines, but if you want an example, search Norm Macdonald's Moth joke on YouTube.
After this video though, don't go now. Please, don't go now. We love you so much.
You reek of desperation, Crash. And I mean that literally. The smell is a combination of BO and lotion. Knowing jokes will only get you so far though. Most of our day-to-day laughter derives from spontaneous causes. That makes a lot of sense. If comedy is all about breaking expectations, then when someone tells you that they're going to tell you something funny and then they tell you something funny, you were already expecting it to be funny, so therefore it's less funny. Does that make sense?
So how do I be funny without telling jokes? Stealing other people's material is all I know how to do.
Spontaneity derives from context. Be aware of your surroundings, your situation, the people you're with, and what they're saying, and capitalize on absurdities in any of these things. Unlike canned humor, which is usually a complete non sequitur, this conversational humor doesn't break the flow of the interaction and feels more natural. Take quips, for example, single sentences that are meant to be funny, but also have meaning.
Like if you say to a frowning person, it takes 42 muscles to frown, but only 4 to pull the trigger.
Terrible message, but good example. It's a funnier way of saying cheer up, but it's organic to the situation and moves the conversation forward. Another classic way to weave humor into your conversations is using stylistic figures, like similes, metaphors, hyperbole, and irony.
You weave humor like a Jewish seamstress.
Thanks, Crash. Your similes are a rainbow of creativity.
That's the best you could come up with? Your metaphors make me want to fill my ears with sulfuric acid.
Joke's on you. It wasn't an example of a metaphor. It was an example of irony. Although it is worth noting that irony doesn't have to be negative. Negative irony can more succinctly be called sarcasm. But all that's required for irony is a contradiction between what is said and what is meant, or what is said and what is real.
Like if I owned a Tibetan Mastiff called Tiny.
Precisely. Then we have more advanced linguistic comedy, like puns, distortions, and register clashes. All of these take common phrases and idioms and twist their meaning to create humor.
Take what culture says about comedy with a grain of salt, a slice of lemon, and a bottle of tequila.
A somewhat mean example of a pun right there. True conversational humor, however, derives from back and forth. Retorts have the responder creating a humorous statement that pairs with the previous statement. Of course, nowadays we'd call this a comeback, like this gem from an interaction between Lady Astor and Winston Churchill.
Winston, if you were my husband, I'd put poison in your coffee. Nancy, if you were my wife, I'd drink it.
Of course, if the retort is said in a playful way, then it's teasing. Teasing still has an attacking or insulting nature to it, but is said in a joking manner. It's a classic way for people to flirt.
Like when you told me that I'm a blemish on the face of the earth because I swallowed your house key that one time. But I knew you were just joshing me.
I actually said you were a blemish on the earth after I'd spent 10 minutes sifting through your excrement, only to find out you lied about swallowing the key.
Got him!
It does raise the question though, when does a tease become a put down? Or a put down a straight up insult? When does something stop being funny and start being offensive?
Triggered! Using the word offensive as a microaggression for me as it reminds me of offensive things, and yet you choose to say it anyway.
Yeah, but I was using it in the context of a discussion about what should be considered offensive. Surely that's alright.
No, it offended me, and that means it's not alright.
Luckily, I know Crash is kidding, but everyone has their own line on what makes something offensive, and it's entirely subjective. It might even change for a given person depending on the context. In a stand-up comedy routine, a comedian might get away with some pretty dark humor. A roast is an environment in which put-downs are invited upon the roastee, giving the comedian even more leeway. But at a fundraiser for a disease like, let's say, multiple sclerosis, the comedian had better be careful how they approach the topic. As we said in our episode What Classifies as Art, art is the relationship between the subject, the observer, and the context. I believe the same is true for comedy. The comedian's intention matters, the observer's interpretation matters, and the environment matters.
Snore! Stop making comedy so serious, Culture. Comedy is meant to be fun and silly and frivolous. That's right, I said frivolous. It's not just you who knows fancy words.
You know what? You're absolutely right, Crash. And sometimes comedy is just absurd. For example, some words just by themselves, without any context whatsoever, are intrinsically funny to us. A study from the University of Warwick by psychology lecturer Thomas Inglefeller gathered 4,997 different English words and asked survey respondents to rank them by how funny they were. The top 10 words were, from least to most funny, egghead, bebop, tinkle, waddle, twit, nitwit, hooter, booby, tit, and booty.
Let's give it up for booty! Woo! Smack that booty!
We can get even more ludicrous than that though. Simple consonant sounds can be funny. Common comedy wisdom holds that K sounds are funny. Most of our swear words have a hard K sound, the theory being that we can enunciate these harder sounds more emphatically, thus making them funnier.
For example!
No way. You hush up now. But even then, this only works for English. Is there some type of humor which relates across all people? A joke or a routine that you could perform for anyone, and they would find it funny? Relatability is at the center of all jokes. If you can't relate or connect with the comedy, then you won't laugh, or at least won't laugh as much.
Humor is often linked to shared experience. Like a guy gets up and says, have you noticed that public restrooms have really inefficient hand dryers? Oh my god, yes I have. Ha ha ha, really good point. They should fix that. It's good to know that somebody finally gets me, because my wife divorced me, which subconsciously forced me to lose all sense of self. So it's nice to think about hand dryers and not that cheating whore.
So what can all people relate to? Easy. Toilet humor. We're all human beings, we all have bodily functions, and if someone farts, then it's bound to make us laugh, or smile at least. Unless you're trapped in the car with it, in which case the fart is no longer a benign violation. It's a serious threat.
So, after all this time, the secret to universal comedy was to keep doing what I've been doing already.
I suppose in some messed up way, yes. But there's so much more to it that I couldn't even begin to properly describe. Something that thousands of professional comedians and philosophers have spent years agonizing over. What we've discussed here is just a tiny slice of what makes things funny. To demonstrate just how blurry the line between funny and not funny is, let's leave everyone with this clip of laughing yoga. Laughing yoga is forced laughter about topics which aren't funny, but the very fact that they're laughing is, in and of itself, funny. If you can wrap your head around that, then props to you.
And I was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease. Very good.
diabetes.
See you all next week. If you enjoy what we do here at Culture Crash, please consider supporting the show via our Patreon, where we have a bunch of awesome rewards, or by checking out our online store. All links are in the description below.